So thank you everyone for joining actually the last in our series of webinars for 2013. It's the one that it's become almost a standard now for us to do this one in December, which is maintenance year-end considerations, things that you may already have started working on or know that you have to update. Sort of a helpful checklist to make sure that you're ready for handling the 2014 fiscal year coming up or calendar year coming up and all the changes that may come with it in your organization. So what we'll be going over is more maintenance things. What should you be double checking in the system that once you put it in place, a lot of things in OpenAir are set it and forget it, but there are certain things that are set it and annually check it type approach. So we'll go through those things just to kind of prompt you to think about what's in your system. And then we'll also talk about how to prepare for next year. What are things that are changing in your organization? Many of you that we've worked with are reorganizing, maybe acquiring companies, growing very fast. So lots of structure change in the organization. How can you keep your system up to date to handle that? And then just some New Year's resolutions to think about. I know New Year's is a couple more weeks off, but we always like to put them out there for ourselves as a company. I want to share them with all of our friends. So maintenance checklist items. OpenAir as a system, it captures the data and you rely on that data to make decisions every day about your organization. And how the operations team is working, how the company is doing. But you also need to make sure that the things that you take for granted, like year-to-date reports or the department structure in the system that is used in subtotaling roll-up on your reports, is accurate. So I always like to kind of start things off with a year-end checklist. Some of you may need more maintenance checklist type things than others. It all depends on how your original system was structured, and of course some dependencies according to like your accounting calendars or even your fiscal year definition that impacts the amount of maintenance that you have to do in OpenAir on an annual basis. Most of the items I'm going to cover will typically be owned by system administrators. So maybe your help desk, someone in IT, maybe a power user in your operations or administration, project administration team would be the people that would end up doing a lot of these activities. So here's some things that we like to throw out there for consideration. So every year companies publish their holiday schedule, so make sure that those are reflected in your work schedules, and we'll go into each of those in the system in case you're not familiar with where they are. Accounting periods, if you are looking to use that or have you been using it, maintaining that list. PTO, which is schedule request, time off, leave balance type things. There have been enhancements to that feature functionality in 2013. Things that you may not be aware of, so we'll touch on those really quick. Reports that you have and any report dependencies like year-to-date, custom time ranges, and so forth. And also just general cleanup to enhance your financial tracking and preventing maybe archiving timesheets to prevent maybe that accidental processing of a really old timesheet for a customer billing activity. So let's go into the first thing, which is the work schedules. So work schedules are the calendars in the system, and this is where you define your working days for the company and the hours per working day. And some of you may also have things like user exceptions in there, or days, hours per day different on different days of the week. So Monday is 8, Tuesday is 4, so forth and so on. So many different configurations out there with the calendar, but one of the basic things that people will use it for is to record the company holidays on the calendar so that when you're putting a timesheet in, at least you get a footnote that says there is a holiday in the calendar. And if you're on the new UI, the new user interface, and we'll touch on that topic a little bit later, the holiday actually is more prominent now as you open up a timesheet for that week. There's a lot of coloring and shading in the new UI, and it's much more prominent than the little blue footnote that used to be there in the old UI, or that you're seeing today if you're still on UI 2. So if you're not familiar with where the holidays are stored inside your OpenAir system, and I do have the new UI on my account. In the administration module, the work schedules, this is the calendars. If you do have calendars for different countries and stuff, make sure you update those as well. And remember the fact that you can actually have lots of countries with multiple calendars. Germany, I know, has like 5 regions which have varying calendars in them. So don't be afraid to define a calendar specifically to an office that people report to. There's no limit to the number of calendars. There's only a limit of people can only report through one calendar or have one association. But the calendar itself is something where you just basically put in the type of holiday it is, or just use the word holiday or company holiday if you'd like, and put the date and start and end date. And then you have a determination of hours to work per day. So this driver here, in case you're not familiar with it, is what defines the difference between 2 standard reporting values: base work schedule, and work schedule hours. So base work schedule hours are all of the hours across the available days of the week. So in my example here, I have a 40-hour work week because it's 8 hours a day, Monday through Friday. So that's a base work schedule. The work schedule will then look at these exceptions and say, oh, there's no hours to work on these days. So it takes those hours out of the calendar. And so for the week of Thanksgiving in this example, this would be a 32-hour work schedule week for me, even though the base work schedule is 40. So that's where this hours per day really impacts the difference in the values of those 2 reporting environments. And just to let you know, you do not have to create a new calendar every year. You simply just tack on the next year's worth of holidays at the very end or wherever you want to put them, and then those will appear in everyone else's calendar automatically. So don't forget that one's the big one. The next one is accounting periods. So accounting periods are a way to add yet another index into dated transactions, things like timesheets and expenses and invoices and revenue transactions and so forth and so on. You may not realize you need a different date, but there are times where you're trying to reconcile OpenAir data with the accounting information in your NetSuite, SAP, Oracle, whatever other system you're working with there. And the numbers just don't seem to match, and that may be because of the way you're using dates in OpenAir. Accounting systems work more on accounting periods. October is October 1 to October 31st. The fact that you created an expense report in September and didn't get it processed until October, that's an October expense. If you run reports in OpenAir on when their expense report was created, of course you're reporting it in the wrong month. So accounting periods is a way to sort of marry up the data between OpenAir and your accounting system. And there's a webinar on that we have available, and of course if you need any more information, you're welcome to reach out to us. So if you are using accounting periods is basically you define the number of periods to match what would be in your accounting calendar. So typically calendars have 12 months. In their 12-month accounting periods, you'd have to put 12 periods into the system. And each month you set what the current or the default accounting period is. So when you run transactions or do functions in OpenAir, it grabs whatever the current value is, applies that to that accounting date field, and now when you run reports on accounting date, everything shows up nice and cleanly according to the accounting period reconcile with accounting. So where is this accounting date information, and how can I run reports on it? In the administration module. If you have the feature turned on, it is a feature that you can activate with customer support. And it's just accounting periods. And what you do is you enter a transaction, one for every definition of a period. Maybe you guys only track things on a quarterly basis. So then you would just set up 4 quarter periods versus 12 monthly periods. I typically see monthly. And you define the month. And then you'll see some checkbox options that says the current and the default. So as you get ready for next year, of course, you're going to start having to deal with January 2014, February 2014. So you want to set these up in advance so that you're not sort of scrambling at the month end and trying to get all of these accounting periods into the system so that your system works nice and neat. If you're not sure where this is picked up or used in the system, there's a couple places in the accounting dates functionality. You can have the current accounting period automatically be applied when, for example, a timesheet is approved or an expense report is approved. You can have the current accounting period applied to a revenue transaction when it's generated. So the accounting period function is pretty powerful in the system actually. And if you have been keeping up with the releases, or even if you haven't, there is a new metadate filtering option on things like custom calculations and the custom date filters that you can add to summary reports. And the nice thing about these metadate fields is they really expand the type of date range filtering you can do in the system. So let's say for like invoice dates, for example, there's a metadate option with a start metadate and an end metadate. And as you draw down, you can see some of the standard values that you've always seen on reporting, but now we get into things like current accounting period to next quarter, or some combination therein, or sorry, I should say next year. So this would say this reporting value is going to be pulling in information from whatever the current accounting period is all the way through to next year. So you're sort of getting a year plus forecasting activity. So current accounting period is something that's now available in this date range type filtering. So if you're using accounting period, that's another way you can take advantage of features in the system. PTO balances. So PTO typically in OpenAir it's called schedule requests and leave accruals. A lot of our friends out in the community use the term time off requests, PTO requests, vacation requests. It's all the same thing. But the PTO balances or leave accrual balances are something that when year end comes, OpenAir understands what the year end means, December 31st means. And many of your rules that you have defined have maybe some kind of carryover logic or expiration logic that allows certain values in certain types of vacation, like vacation balances can be carried over, sick time can't, things like that. Where you have a little bit of maintenance to do at year end just to make sure all of the balances automatically compute correctly. So things like, let's say if you have an expiration of accrued time. If you get 40 hours of vacation a year, you have 4 left on December 31st. If you don't use it, you lose it, and it zeroes out and you get 40 again in January 1. So if you have positive balances, OpenAir handles that loss calculation very, very easily. The negative, however, does not. There's no expiration of negative. It doesn't know to say, okay, you went over by 4 hours, -4. Okay, you start fresh with a 0 again. That was always something that it just sort of carried it forward along the way, and so you would always have to do a manual correction unless you wanted that negative to just continue carrying forward into 2014. So there have been some changes to the rules there, and especially for those of you who have accruals in the system that deal with partial accruals. So some companies, they grant all the vacation on January 1, but of course if you start in May, you get a partial accrual for the year. And in the case of annual or quarterly type accruals, partial accruals have always been problematic in the system. You have to go and sort of make manual adjustments to get the accruals to work right for a person that gets hired after the start of the period. So there have been some enhancements to this area, especially when it comes to the partial accrual. So what is the number of days to consider in a month for an accrual? What's the dates against which to apply the accrual? So it can be a little more smart about how it handles the accrual. So you may want to go and check your rules for next year's processing and make sure that those features are being leveraged. And of course, the negative balances, you can actually stop negative balances from going over or allow it to continue like it always has, so that you would be able to maintain the data balances a little bit easier in the system. Okay, so some enhancements there that may make life a little bit easier when it comes to balance maintenance. And reporting. So many financial reports are viewed in like a year-to-date type view, And I have to say one of the funniest stories I have is working on site with a customer, and yes, it was we were working on monthly year-to-date reports and yearly reports, and so we were working together on December 31st of all days and working on reports, and we got to around 1 o'clock in the morning. It was New Year's Eve, but we ran reports just to verify one more time that things looked good, and everything came up zeros, and it was because it was now the next year. So 2014 had happened, or 2013, or whatever the year was that had changed over. So our initial heart dropping was really a matter of, oh, it's because it's a year-to-date report. We had to go and change the dates, obviously, on the report to get that final validation and be able to go home before the sun came up. But year-to-date, it does kind of catch you off guard that first week in January. So just be aware. Make sure people are aware that if you have certain reports that are year-to-date reports, they are going to look very empty in January. You may have to set up a last year view if you need to, so people can do their analysis for 2013 that first week in January when they're back and not look at a bunch of zeros. Okay. The other flip of the whole year-to-date thing is custom time ranges. So some of our friends out there in the community, the company definition of the calendar is not January through December. The fiscal year is not January through December. And in fact, the months are not January 1 to January 31st, February 1 to February 28th. And of course, you all know who you are. But what ends up happening is if you don't follow that calendar, which is just embedded in OpenAir's structure and its logic, what you have to do is you deal with custom time ranges. Not difficult, but it does require some maintenance. So a custom time range is where you redefine redefine a time range or redefine a period in the system. And if you have a different fiscal year, then you may have to define a fiscal year and a quarterly custom time range, so that when you run a Q1 report, Q1 is March to end of May, March, April, May. Okay? And that's all it does, is it basically restructures so that when you run reports and your header says Q1, that Q1 is defined to be different months than what the typical this quarter, next quarter, last quarter type values would be in OpenAir. And similar to those of you who have what's called a 445 calendar, where, and this could drive the importance of utilization and financial reporting for a quarter. 445 calendar is not natively supported in OpenAir. You do have to define custom time ranges, so that the month of January would be defined as perhaps December 28th to January 25th. And February is January 26th to February 22nd or something like that. And where work falls, especially when it gets near the end of the month, the work falls in the defined month based on your custom time range. And if you're not familiar with this capability, or you're wondering how you could deal with this in your organization, under the Global Settings option of your administration module, there's something called Custom Time Ranges. And it's here where you can actually define the different types of ranges that you could use on a calendar. So let's look at 2011 company views. So in this example, I've redefined it so that the headers of a report come out differently. So Q1, Q2, Q3, and then I break out Q4 by month, and then do a future view and then end. So I've actually changed my report to be sort of a combination quarterly, monthly report at the same time. But for those of you who work with federal customers, their fiscal calendar is October until September. So their fiscal calendar definition would go into the OpenAir system such as this. So Q1 would be October to December. Q2 is January to March, and so forth. So when I would run a report, basically I would run a report. I would pick this time range. This time range then is available, and it would display the information according to the dates of the transactions, but they would line up with these column headers in the report. And if you're still not quite clear on how that works, all I have to do is just run a report here. And so when I open up like a summary report, for example, one of the time ranges I can pick is this federal current year by quarter. And that has 4 periods in it, Q1, Q2, Q3, and Q4. So I can say I want all of those. And I defined it way back in 2011. So let's just go ahead and say that's the start date. And let's see what comes up. So I picked that custom time range with 4 periods. Oh, I had the wrong starting year. 2011 starts in 2010 for the government. I forgot. So I picked that time period. I put 4 of the periods from the definition of the custom time range. And so now when I run the report, all of this information lines up to the definition of Q1 according to the federal government, October, November, December, Q2, Q3, Q4 in total. And you can do this for any type of report formatting, but it's particularly important for those of you who have sort of an alternate calendar to run the company by. And as a year-end maintenance item, you'll have to make sure you add all of those for 2014 coming up pretty quickly here. And finally, archiving timesheets. So this is a function I don't think a lot of customers take advantage of, but it is sort of a safety net, so to speak. And what happens is if you are doing time billing, if you do T&M type projects, you may have noticed at the very bottom of the rule there's a checkbox that says exclude archived timesheets. And for most rules it's defaulted to be on. And you may have wondered about it, you may not have wondered about it, but what it's used for is if you want to sort of clear out the list of timesheets that people are looking at. So there's open, submitted, approved, and rejected. And you know, if you have a lot of users and you've been using the system for a few years, that list of approved timesheets starts getting really big. And if you don't have some kind of filter on it, it makes it difficult to find data in the system. You know, after a certain point, I think 15,000 rows or something, the headers to the column filters disappear because there's just too much data for the display to show. So what some customers will do and what you can take advantage of is this archive activity. And if you're not familiar with it, in the Timesheets module, if a timesheet is in the Approve stage, if you use the Run in Action feature where the checkbox is right next to the timesheets, you have the ability to archive timesheets. And what that does is it basically moves the timesheet into a stage called Archived, which is hanging out here at the very end. Okay? The timesheets still are available for all the reporting, but they just get moved out of that approved list. So now your list may become a little bit more manageable. I've been using my system since 2007, so it would make sense for me to go and sort of archive some of that really old stuff. So I really have sort of last year and this year maybe available to do my viewing here in the approved list. And of course, if you have the Time Entries tab, Archived is a status, and you would be able to filter information by that status as you're looking at the system. But another benefit is if you wanted to make sure that that time was never ever processed for future billing, simply because it's been 2 years, we're not going to bill a customer and you want to move it out of the way, the archived option is available, and using that in conjunction with the billing rule to exclude archived timesheets, you will never run the risk of potentially processing a timesheet that's too old to process because you've archived it. And just so I can show you here on the time billing rule at the very bottom, here's that checkbox, exclude time from archived timesheets. So now you know why that archive stage is there and why that checkbox is there. It's really a safety net. So as you finish processing timesheets, you can archive them. I like to recommend that you just archive something that's older than 2 years, and it just sort of manages that approved list easily. So those are some of the maintenance items that we come across a lot that we have to do even in our own system. You know, especially the holiday calendars, the accounting periods. and those custom time ranges if you're using them. Make sure you get all those updated. So January is just around the corner, and what are some of the changes that are coming with the organization? Many of you have finished your budgeting process already. You're looking to do a reorganization or change some of the structure of the organization. So what do you have to consider in OpenAir that may need to be reflected? And in some cases you may want to preserve historical information the way it was, move forward. So there's a lot of options as far as sort of defining secondary hierarchies and using user entity tags that can allow you to keep an old versus new reporting structure in the organization. But first, let's talk about your time off, your vacation, paid time off activity. So things to think about are, in 2014, do you have any changes in policies based on, some companies, based on how the calendars, company holidays fall on the calendar, you may or may not get something called a floating holiday, for example. Or maybe you want to, your company has hit its 50th year anniversary and everyone gets an anniversary day off or something. So think about those changes so you can set those rules up in the system and update the users for all those. And another thing to keep in mind is something about the leave accrual rules in OpenAir. The way that the feature functionality is structured, it's meant ideally to be a set it and forget it, where you hire somebody, assume they're going to work for you for 30 years, so set up all the different rules they could potentially earn as far as benefits in the organization, and use that transfer option to move accruals from one rule to another as the years go by. If you're not familiar with that, if you look on the user record, oh, it's not on in here. Well, let me make sure I turn that on really quick. So when you're using the leave accrual functionality, on the user record you have the ability to define the rules that apply to a user and the type of holiday earnings that they get. And so you would define the rule, and you may have like a vacation 5 years, vacation 10 years, vacation 15 years, and different accrual amounts based on that. So what you can do is you can set up the person to have an accrual rule that's good until their 5-year anniversary. Oops. And a little click happy there. And let's pretend this sick time is a vacation one as well. So vacation level 2 could be 12/1/18 to 11. Oh, just leave it open-ended and say I'm going to transfer to Rule 2. And what this essentially would do is the Rule 1 accrues up until that November 30th date. On December 1, whatever balances are left over transfer down to the second rule, and the second rule will start accruing forever because there's no end date on it. So you can leave these dates blank, and it basically essentially leaves it open-ended. So take advantage of that, and double check your rules the way that you have them set up. If you have any changes in benefits, of course, you'll have to update those. User promotion. So you probably have an organization structure where there's you can promote people to different levels or even to different jobs in the organization. So what has to happen to update OpenAir so that they're adequately reflected in the system? That could be like their job code could go from senior consultant to principal consultant. Their cost per hour most likely will change, assuming they'll get some kind of raise to go with that promotion. And in fact, with that job code change, they may also fall into a different target bill rate category where their standard bill rate may not be, it may be $100 an hour, it goes up to $125 because they're in a more senior category. So things like that on the user definition, make sure to update those because those could then drive into financial forecasts and your margin and profitability reporting as well. Utilization targets. So you may have defined utilization targets in 2013 and you have reports that are basically showing people how much of their utilization target, assuming maybe perhaps you call it billable utilization, how much of that target they have achieved, which may ultimately result in a promotion or some type of compensation in the company. So if they change their category or maybe the business itself has changed their policy, do you need to update their target utilization? That is a date indexed value. So if the value changes between 2013 and 2014, you can actually put in a different value for 2014, and therefore you'd have 2014 reports using one value, 2013 reports using a different value. If you have a large number of users and you have a large number of these entries to put in, this is where the Integration Manager tool, some of you may know it as OpenAir Connect. It's a very easy tool to migrate this data into the system, minimal formatting of the data, but it is a database direct data load. So in order for you to get that, you have to have a license to use the tool, and then you also have to have some training. So it could cause some problems in your database if you don't know how to use it, but it's actually a fairly straightforward product to be able to update this type of data, especially if you have a large volume once a year to do. Cost of living adjustment. So not only are people getting promoted, but you may have just a cost adjustment that the financial team is computing based on cost incurrences by the company. It may be taxes, it may be salaries, it may be facility changes. All of those costs get bundled up and usually get added into some type of loaded hourly cost compensation. So the cost values that you have, you may need to update all of the users to have a cost value now that's different from 2013. And of course, just like the target utilization value, this area of the system is date indexed. So you have a current value and you have dated transactions of what the values were for previous time frames. So if you're not familiar with where this is, and this is on individual users, so again, that Integration Manager data load might be very useful here. In the cost table has sort of a current value and then previous values. So some of you may be using this feature now. In fact, you're maybe using it to sort of to normalize cost per hour based on the number of hours in the system. This is like a cost adjustment value to reflect more of a realization information versus pretending that 40 hours or pretending that 60 hours of work is 60 hours of cost. It may only be 40 hours of cost if the person's on salary. So this, this cost table may have entries in it already by that process. If you're not familiar with that process, in the reports area under Advanced, there's a special report called Historical Utilization, Percent Historical Utilization. And it's OpenAir's base utilization report. It doesn't use custom calculations. It's a standard report that comes with the OpenAir system, and it uses, it has some logic that you can configure into the report to explain what's the denominator. Is it work schedule hours, base work schedule hours? Do you subtract vacation? That kind of thing. And what is considered the hours that you want to compute the percentage with? Is it billable hours? Is it all hours? Is it certain project stage information? That kind of thing. And based on the percentages, you can use that to actually do a cost adjustment in your cost tables to normalize the cost to 100% value, depending on what values come out on the report. So if somebody was only 50% utilized, it would double their cost. If somebody was 150% utilized, it would reduce their cost per hour. And therefore your reports would come out to be more accurate to salary information. But this report has that cost adjustment feature in it simply by the nature of the fact that OpenAir built that into this report. So when you run the report and you come up with these percentages, however you've calculated them, like your Landau Calrissian has 28.57%, which is not 100%, which means the cost is going to increase in order to make it be worth 100% of a utilized person. I can basically enter a cost adjustment into their table automatically from this report, by clicking on a quote. Click here to adjust the user's loaded cost. Overwrite the existing costs, which is not the current cost. It won't update the current cost. It will just put a cost entry in the table. And all of these individuals got updated except for this person who already had a cost adjustment for that time period, so another one was not added into it. So we can go look at Obi-Wan Kenobi. Look at his cost table, and you can see the November report that I just ran changed his cost up to 128 because it was a partial percentage. It wasn't the full 100%. So it assumed the person was not working, not recording all the hours that they need to record, but they are still getting paid full time. Okay. So just some thoughts there. There's a whole process behind using that report, defining what the period is, who runs it, what contributes to the percentage value that would impact the value of this cost, all logical things that need to be defined before the process can be implemented and these cost values can be put into the tables. Okay. But from a 2014 maintenance perspective, the cost tables may also be something that you need to update just for the fact that the standard loaded cost per month or per year is changing because of the changes in cost to the company. So revenue and billing targets. This is a concept that I use within our organization, and that's part of the budgeting process is really to put drivers for revenue and billing targets out there and you may have the same thing in your organization for certain departments, for certain regions, for certain parts of the organization. They have targets they have to hit. And most likely you have some type of regular management meeting where the management meeting is reviewing these numbers against what the target is, and so you have some kind of spreadsheet or graphs or something that you review as part of that meeting. The nice thing is OpenAir can actually do that as well. You can actually see it real time, and you can measure information real time on these dashboards by using the graphical dashboards. And if you are one of the customers who have already converted to the new user interface, the graphical dashboard feature has been greatly enhanced. It's much more interactive and very useful. So the more that you can get into a graphical dashboard, the more information you can visually see and kind of hover over and read into. So let me just show you that real quick in the system. So there's always been, the graphical dashboard feature was introduced about 3 years ago. And for those of you who have worked with me directly, you know that this is one of the features I leverage quite a bit in the system, and I was very happy to see that UI3 built upon this. But this dashboard here, for example, the way that this has been represented is the orange line, which is marked as internal. This is the target line. This is the line that in 2012 was defined to be the revenue targets by month, and just adding all the targets up month after month, so you get sort of a how does the company look at year-end type goal. And then add your forecast functionality. So many of you may be using forecast features in OpenAir. So what is your forecast for the year? What's signed work? What's pipeline work? And how does that compare graphically to your revenue targets or your billing targets? And you can just see that, and you guys know that information is always real-time in OpenAir. So I open up this dashboard, and I know it's point in time, this is exactly what it looks like in the company for the forecasting activity. And to be honest, a lot of people will ask me, well, how do you get your revenue targets in? It's as simple as being a little patient for 12 billing rules and hard coding in what the forecast is for those values. So let me just move this over here so I can see the billing rules. I'll show you the billing rules. So once I show this to people, they realize it's a bit of a cheat, but it's the same as hard coding it on a spreadsheet. So these are all the rules for 2013. That's the forecast for that month. Therefore, it shows up on the chart in that amount of money. And then, of course, the normal forecasting computes and is displayed on the same dashboard. So take advantage of the fact that the dashboard, if you're on UI3, I'm always suggesting the dashboards as a way to look at data real time. But when it comes to sort of year-end and forecasting and projections and stuff, even the UI3 now is a much better way to look at data, because now you can hover over it and see the actual values instead of having to drill into the report along the way. And then the ultimate reorganization. So this is where departments are changing, managers are changing, cost centers are changing, maybe the organization structure by region is changing, and this impacts a lot of OpenAir because it's so structured and has so many different variables on how to represent your organization in the tool. So things like departments, cost centers, the managers of people that have to be done, the approval processes if there's something unique to a certain department, or maybe there's a policy change and it has to be my manager and then the accounting team or something. And hierarchies. Hierarchies are actually a way you can have hierarchies for 2013, you can have a hierarchy for 2014, and be able to preserve the structure of the organization using hierarchies, because hierarchies really serve two purposes. One, data access. Two, report structure. So by setting up multiple, like a hierarchy for each year, if the organization drastically changes, you can use the hierarchy as a way to preserve how did the data look when the organization was structured this way in 2013 versus that way in 2014. And of course, for clients and projects, if you have a cost center change, you're going to have to update the projects and clients with the cost centers and their hierarchies as well. And then a slew of custom fields. All of those are very particular to your individual setup. So custom fields, maybe the types of offerings you're delivering in the organization changes. Maybe you have reporting lines that are changing, and all those values in custom fields end up having to change as well. The only update, the one item that I like to caution people on, so everything is very easy to update manually, of course, and if you have volumes, an integration manager may be an option for you to update the data directly in the database. But there is just one caution, and that is cost centers. So the cost center functionality in OpenAir does not have a date index. The minute you make the change on a cost center, like you change a user from cost center A to cost center B, anything at that point in time, after that point in time when that button is saved, is going to get logged against that new cost center. You can't really control that date. So just be conscious of the timing of when you change cost centers if you're heavily relying on that feature functionality for reporting. If it is a problem from a timing perspective, some suggestions are actually to switch over to using a cost center definition, but put it in the entity tag as a tag group, so that you have date control on it, and that way reports can roll up correctly to the right quote-unquote cost center. You lose the inheritance functionality that way that comes with the cost center feature, but that may be a trade-off, or maybe that inheritance is not a critical need for your organization. So just be cautious about that timing of the cost center updates. And then the last item to consider for 2014 is, I know the NetSuite OpenAir company has spent consciously spending a lot of time coordinating with customers and working to get everyone onto the new user interface. A lot of enhancements have now gone into the new user interface, primarily from customer feedback from early adopters. And the large majority of the customer base, I believe, has been converted, because the conversion started officially in August of this year. August, September, October, November. Every month there was a sort of a wave of conversion. The conversions are going to continue into next year. So if you have not already converted to UI3, just some things to think about. Customers that are moving on to UI3, they are benefiting from having an experience with the UI before having it just show up one day. And that is primarily because OpenAir is giving you a sandbox for free that you can do your testing with and get some familiarity, maybe build your own training materials. It's really a navigation change. There have been feature functionality differences, like how do you create things in the system is very different. How do you access where the tips are is very different. but primarily it's a navigation change. But change requires coordination, and the more people know in advance, the smoother it will go. So we like to recommend that leverage the fact that you have this sandbox, do some day-in-the-life tests, some usability activities, have a few people log in, put time and expense in the system, just so they get a feel and can give you feedback on, here's where we have to focus on the communication message out to our users, because our people are mostly in the field and they use the mobile option, so the UI is not a big deal for them. But for those people who are sitting at their desk day in and day out and they're always in the system, the UI is a big deal, and so you have to make sure you craft the message accordingly. And definitely make sure you get the word out. Communicate at least a week before. Say, hey, this is coming. Give them some tips. Maybe record a video or some slides on navigation changes. And OpenAir actually has, because this is such a big change with the way the system looks and the navigation of the system, there is a What's New tutorial that's always available in the product. When you first log in the very first time, you're going to get this little pop-up window on this little pop-up tab on the left-hand side. And when you click into it, it gives you the basics of what's changed. Why do things look different, and what do I have to do different now? Okay. Once you've accessed that the first time, you can go into the What's New menu, or the User Center profile, and click on What's New to be able to go through the system, the demo again. And in my sandbox, I don't seem to be able to get out of it. There we go. So it's always available here on the User Center personalization for the What's New if this disappears, because after a while that's going to go away. So there's a list of maintenance checklist, the maintenance checklist for you guys, something to think about from what do we need to fix in the system because the company is changing. But what else can you think about? Many of you have been coming to these webinars. We're going to continue these webinars in 2014, so thank you very much for your patronage for these. But one of the things that really keeps you on top of your game with the OpenAir product is keeping up on those new features. So the new UI was a biggie. But just as big in 2014 will be features that only can work in the new UI. And the fact that this new technology is available will give the OpenAir product, I believe, an ability to take advantage of technology that it couldn't deal with before, like drag and drop and stuff. So I'm really looking forward to what's coming in 2014. And then things like look at how your OpenAir administration activities are going. Do you need some help with that? We can definitely help you with your help desk functionality. Maybe having an expert behind the scenes, or maybe somebody handling tickets directly. Everyone is looking to improve bottom line. Maybe this is a cost-effective solution for you. And last but certainly not least, we definitely like to have the user community interact with each other. Best way to learn is from experience from other people, and not having to troubleshoot things on your, fall into a hole that somebody else has already fallen into. So the LinkedIn OpenAir user group, lots of people. We have up to 577 members now, which is a great volume. And we have lots of people helping each other out. It's sort of a community help desk, and it's a really great place to get advice from other folks and ask questions. Top Step certainly is involved with that, so we definitely like to see action there. And we are going to continue our weekly tips. If you're not aware, we actually have 2 ebooks now where we took all the tips that we did on a weekly basis and put them in a document form, an electronic document form. And just to cover the cost of that whole publication software that we had to buy. They're really cheap. You can go online. I don't know if they're a great stocking gift because they're electronic, but if you have electronic stockings, then certainly a great gift for friends that are using OpenAir. And definitely we'd like to hear that people are talking to each other. We are very much wanting to pass knowledge along to everyone. So being part of the user community definitely is a benefit all around for everyone. So as I get ready to wrap up, I'm going to open up the phone lines here after I go through this preview of 2014, and then I'll ask if there's any questions for things. Okay. So for 2013, again, a huge response from the user community, great support from all you guys in our webinars and our weekly tips and in support of TopStep in general, so we are very thankful and appreciative for that. We always like to give you a little teaser on what's coming in 2014 and a few surprises that we didn't know actually we hadn't planned for. We are continuing the webinars in 2014. They will focus more on feature functionality of OpenAir. Our first one in January is going to be a review of the 2013 releases and feature functionality that you may want to benefit from, especially if you've gone to the UI3 and just may have not noticed because there was a lot of work done this year in the product. The reporting workshop, we sort of came up with that. It wasn't even on our roadmap from last year, and we came up with it in Q1. We rolled it out. We had 4 successful instances of it throughout the U.S. Great feedback from everyone, so we're really appreciative of that. We're trying to work to make that something that more people can attend, looking to maybe offer it as something that a company could just have us come in a room full of people and we just do this workshop with everyone. So you're very much the expert on reporting at the end of it. So we're looking to make some improvements there. And last year we rolled out our consulting skills course, but we're working to revamp that and have some more focus on project management as well. So identifying stakeholders and knowing how to manage a project and understand the dynamics of an environment. We deal with that every day with us running projects, so we definitely want to pass those best practices on to friends as well. We are putting together a user group schedule for next year. It's going to be published probably this week on TopStep's website. We're coordinating with NetSuite on that. We are identifying a few new cities like St. Louis, for example, and Minneapolis, which we hadn't done in a while. So we're going to be putting some new cities out there. And of course, last year actually we scheduled one based on feedback in Houston that we hadn't planned on doing. So if you haven't had one in your area, you definitely think it would be worthwhile to get groups of people together in your area. We are always willing to try and get something up and running in different cities through the U.S. And of course, we are planning to come out with version 3 of our tips book, ideally by the May timeframe, which is usually when SuiteWorld is. It's going to be, I think, the 12th to the 14th this year in San Jose. We are also looking to be a sponsor, but we haven't signed up yet because it's not released. But we are expecting to be there, and we would very much look forward to seeing everyone there as well. Thank everyone for coming, and you know how to get a hold of us. If you don't, just email us at info@topstepconsulting.com. Always definitely feedback on the OpenAir user group is appreciated. And visit our website. We are restructuring it a little bit so our services and offerings are more clear, but definitely lots of good information there as well. So thank you, and Happy New Year, everyone.